associated feelings to become more intense, although continual eye contact speeds the process. Upon initial eye contact with 146, recent memories will begin to surface in the subject. For example, subjects who have ignored a friend in the hall or exceeded the speed limit will be reminded of these events and begin to feel wildly guilty, whether or not they would normally care about the event. With continued exposure to the gaze of 146, the subject will begin to recall older and more vivid memories, with a corresponding increase in feelings of shame in the subject. Generally, after 30 minutes of exposure, the memories will move from being vivid recollections to intense hallucinations, with the subject unable to distinguish the past from the present, or the imagined from the real. Subjects have been observed to regress in personality as well, particularly in cases where memories of childhood trauma have been brought up. Any test subjects exposed for over 30 minutes should be restrained, both for their own safety and the safety of others. All subjects to date who have been exposed to 146 for 60 minutes have completely retreated into their hallucinations. So far, no such subject has been restored to consciousness from this near catatonic state. Such subjects must be fed intravenously and are unresponsive to external stimuli, save for occasional murmuring consistent with their regression. It has also been noted that when subjects recall a shameful event, they will often feel compelled to make amends for their actions. This is not generally a problem in the case of minor offenses, and has in some cases led to greater unity among staff. However, problems arise when the subject cannot make amends, either because the offended party cannot be contacted, or because the transgression is somehow irredeemable. Sometimes, the subject will put forth renewed positive efforts in order to balance out their guilt. However, in most such cases, subjects fall into a deep depression and/or turn to some form of self-punishment, including self-mutilation and suicide. SCP-146 was acquired from an individual in Birmingham, UK. This individual had acquired 146 during the estate sale of a renowned philanthropist. It was purchased in a lot with a number of other artifacts. When this individual began to experience 146 This is the first log. In order to calibrate a baseline for 146's effects, a standard 4x4 meter interrogation room was divided in half by an opaque curtain. 146 was placed on a table inside a protective plexiglass case in one half of the room. On the other side of the curtain, Subject D was restrained such that he was looking directly at 146's position. Researchers maintained constant communication with the subject via intercom throughout the testing process. The curtain was dropped, causing the subject to look squarely into the eyes of 146. The subject voiced immediate discomfort and closed his eyes, with an increase in heart rate of 15 beats per minute. With prompting, the subject related the memories he was recalling, beginning with minor breaches of behavior protocol. The subject then recalled several altercations with other prisoners before his being taken by the Foundation. Researchers noted that as time went on, the subject became more cooperative and his speech patterns changed, resembling someone undergoing therapeutic hypnosis. After 15 minutes, the subject's speech had become slurred, and his EEG patterns showed similarities to someone experiencing vivid dreams. The subject entered into one half of a dialogue, which culminated in his trying to break his restraints. After several minutes, the subject ceased thrashing and began to cry. The subject started begging, apparently to someone in his hallucination. "Stop. Take it back. Don't. I won't do it again. I'm sorry. I don't want to. Not again. Stop. Please." This behavior continued until after 54 minutes of exposure to 146. The subject's vocalizations halted, and his EEG showed signs consistent with coma. After an additional hour, no further effects were observed, and the subject was removed and euthanized. It should be noted, at this point, 146 was being kept along with other artifacts purchased at the auction, because it was not yet known that the effect was confined to 146 alone. It was theorized that this containment approximated favorable containment and therefore kept 146's effect at its base strength. The next experiment log. The first experiment conducted after it was determined that 146 consisted only of the bronze head took place after 146 had been moved to a standard 1/2 meter cubed storage bin, where it had remained for 2 days. Another subject and 146 were placed on opposite sides of a curtain in a standard interrogation room, as in previous experiments. The subject was restrained as in previous experiments. jumped to 180 beats per minute, but then dropped rapidly to 40, and the subject lost consciousness. Medical personnel entered the room and began examining the subject, at which time the subject regained consciousness, her heart rate spiking to 175. The subject struggled violently against her restraints and was soon able to break the restraint on her right arm, severely damaging her own arm and hand in the process. A paramedic was injured as the subject struck him in order to gain access to his first aid kit. The subject was able to grab a small scalpel and jam it into her own neck before guards could regain control. Medical staff administered first aid, but the subject died during emergency surgery due to blood loss. After several similar incidents, it was determined that 146's ability was affected by its containment. Anyone wishing to do further research must take this into account, as even brief accidental exposure could prove harmful. And with that, we will conclude this file with the special containment procedures in place. Containment procedures have been revised after it was noted that the effects of 146 were sharply and dangerously increased under previous containment. That being a standard 1/2 meter cubed secure storage bin. The bin should remain free. However, should a researcher wish to test 146 at high intensity, Level 3 clearance is required for any personnel wishing to enclose or cover 146 for a period exceeding 2 days. During normal storage, 146 is to be kept on a marble pedestal in its storage room. 146's standard storage room measures no less than 20 square meters, with stuccoed walls and a ceiling painted to resemble a clear daytime sky. The room is to be kept well lit, full daylight equivalent at all times, furnished with an assortment of potted plants, which must be tended to daily, and decorated in the style of the late Republican period of Rome. Experimentation with different interior styles has shown that 146 seems to prefer this arrangement, and to have aesthetic preferences consistent with the aristocracy of Rome from that era. While this containment is standard, researchers with clearance level 2 or higher may experiment with different containment settings in order to modify the effects of 146. While 146 is non-motel and therefore requires little security, general, 1 day of covering or confinement will cause 146 to skip over the beginning phase of its effect and begin with the most traumatic memories. After 3 days, 146 has been shown to produce its effect without having to make direct eye contact first. After 7 days, the effect of 146 is both far more intense and no longer confined to subjects within 146's field of vision. Researchers in an adjacent room are affected. Permission to experiment beyond 7 days is denied by order of O5. Blinders and decorative screens are available for personnel who must enter 146's containment area for maintenance. And thus, this file has been concluded at current date. And so, we will move on to our second and final file for today. Item number SCP-147, classified as Euclid. Discovered in 1983 in a civilian home in Detroit, Michigan. 147 appears to be a 1957 General Electric brand black and white television. 147 has been observed to exhibit 2 different behaviors. Optimal. When 147 is in an acceptable room, it will display broadcasts of 1950s era comedies, such as The Burns and Allen Show, Father Knows Best, and I Love Lucy. In every case, each broadcast has been completely unique. Archives of the programs, none of which are still being produced, have failed to find any record of the episodes that 147 plays. No commercials are shown, and there is no indication as to which station would be broadcasting these shows. All broadcasts are in black and white. Subjects exposed to 147 in its optimal state reported a pleasant feeling of relaxation. In this state, the item's volume and channels can be adjusted, though the off switch appears to have no effect. Its second mode is hostile. nervous breakdown after 2 minutes of exposure. Every subject has displayed an extreme reluctance to recall the contents of the broadcasts, and 2 out of the 15 subjects tasked with viewing 147's hostile broadcasts have since committed suicide. None of the item's controls respond during hostile broadcasts. Attempts to examine the internals of 147 have been unsuccessful, as the item's shell resists any and all attempts to crack it open. Placing the item in a Faraday cage in order to negate any possible transmissions it could be receiving had no effect. The effects of long exposure to 147 have not been documented. Any and all recreational activities involving 147 are to be scheduled at least 1 week beforehand, with approval by level 4 personnel. After a certain suggestion, several objects manufactured throughout the 1960s era were brought in. Objects made past March of the year 1965 have resulted in a hostile behavior. Exact dating is difficult due to the troubles of obtaining materials precisely made on testable dates and times. Reasons as to why it acts in such a way, depending on specific objects' dates, are unknown and being tested. As has been verified repeatedly, the presence of persons born after March 1965 does not in of itself trigger a hostile event. For reasons still unknown, 147 objects mainly to manufactured items. A doctor recently conducted an experiment in which he clothed himself with a vintage pre-1965 articles of clothing, with the caveat that he had 3 big flare pens invented in the 1970s in his shirt pocket. What he saw while seated in front of 147 he would later describe as a bizarre episode of I Love Lucy, featuring a surprising amount of gunplay. Recent tests that involved exposing convicted rapists and psychopaths to the object while it was hostile has indicated that the object is able to tailor the images to the viewer. A rapist was strapped in a metal chair manufactured in 1986